If you're a smart cookie and a smart investor, do you really need a financial advisor? Let's talk about that this week here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn.
We've got some turbulence up ahead.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Scott and I as we talk about, hey, I know my stuff. Do I really need to work with a financial professional? And I want to talk about some pros and cons and some things, Scott, on this topic, because, obviously you work with pilots and a lot, smart people, a lot of folks that are doing complicated jobs. And hey, maybe they're fantastic at doing things themselves on the financial side. Do they really need a financial professional? So let's get into that this week. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Mark?
Doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Good.
Appreciate that. So do you see that? I mean, the DIY movement, right? In all aspects, certainly finance, has blown up the last number of years, right? I mean, the market's been great for a while. Let's be honest. It's had its blips, but overall, it's been pretty darn good. You can throw a dart at the dartboard, and you're probably doing all right on the S&P or on the market in general. And I think maybe the key to this question, Scott, is the accumulation phase, growing our money. Technology and the markets as of late's made this job a little bit easier, but the preservation of that money through your retirement years, that's a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it comes down to the word advisor. Like, what does that mean? Who am I really?
Everybody's one
working
nowadays.
with? Yeah, exactly. And I know for me, I fired 2 separate advisors before I started doing this for a living. And, they were nice guys, but, one of them was watching our stuff when I had a bunch of military time and, was gone for training all the time, a year in Afghanistan. And then I come home and I'm like, dude, there's been 4 transactions and it's only to raise fees. There's you're doing absolutely nothing other than just making sure you're getting paid. Like, that to me is not an advisor.
Right.
To me, if I'm not getting any actual advice beyond, well, let me just stick you in this model portfolio and then milk fees out of it. Yeah, that's probably, you are better off going on your own than being with a bad advisor. I would say that. Because if you're with a bad advisor, you're going to get bad advice, not in your best interest. And you're not really going to get that leadership and accountability that you should be getting, from a trusted advisor. And so, to me, I think that's one big part of it is hey, am I getting some advice on my non-investment items, right?
Well, thank you for saying that, because I think a lot of people do confuse because everybody's an advisor. They think, oh, they help me pick my portfolio. There's a whole lot more to it than just picking stocks, man.
Absolutely. And to me, if you're just all in on the S&P 500 or you're building a stock basket of portfolios, like you said, when you're in a bull market and you got a handful of years of back-to-back great returns, I mean, a lot of that you can be riding that wave. And I mean, I know our pilots get a lot of training and a lot of mental exercise around fighting against bias. You can really get some bias around the companies you own or the methods that you're deploying, and you start to really lose sight that they're not based on data. They're not based on long-term data.
And long-term is the key. I'll have to find the link to the study. Do you remember this study, Scott, where they looked at portfolios of people who had died, and they did better than people who were actively managing stuff because they were staying the court. Fidelity. Thank you. Yeah, because they were just kind of staying the court. Blew my mind, but it's like the dead folks did better because, again, it was long-term because nothing was changing.
Right. Well, and then again, you kind of compare that with the Vanguard study where, the Vanguard did a study over 25 years of different account holders. And what they found was, advisor-led accounts did about 3% more per year.
Yeah.
And then when you compound that over time, it's significant over somebody's working lifetime.
Yeah, and then the behavioral side too. I think it was the 3% and then the behavioral modification, because that's the thing, right? I need to be able to call you up and be like, yo, Scott, I'm thinking about doing this. And you're like, okay, well, tell me why, right? And then you have that sounding board and go, okay, well, here's why it's a good idea or here's why it's a crap idea.
A lot of investing is avoiding bad decisions. And that's hard to put a price tag on, right? If we're talking about trying to get in and out of the market or taking a home mortgage out to buy Bitcoin or whatever crazy idea that some people can get after. Now, there might be a certain portion where we say, hey, why don't we take 5%? And if you're somebody who wants to be out there and trying to bet on some big things, do it with some intention and some planning, not emotion. And so the more we can remove emotion out of what we're doing, the more effective people are going to be, again, long term. And I think that long term outlook is really one of the biggest things that most people struggle with. If you look at the average time that an investment is held on the New York Stock Exchange, it's 3.3 years. That is not a long.
That's like an NFL. That's like an NFL player's life expectancy in the league. Yeah,
that's not a long-term investor, right?
Yeah.
And so that speaks to a lot of the behavioral tendencies of a lot of people. And so, like you said, I mean, like so many of our clients like have bachelors in finance, masters.
Oh yeah, they're
whatever.
smart people. Yeah.
I mean, very smart, very talented, but you still have to kind of measure that with like, hey, do I have the time for it? Right?
That's another great point. Do you want to be your own advisor in retirement?
Do I have
yet?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Does your spouse want you to be that? That's maybe a better question. Hey, put it down. Spend some time with me. Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, do I have the passion for it?
Yeah.
Right. Do I have the systems for it to remove my own bias?
Yeah.
And I think there's just a handful of those things that, you just kind of have to decide. I mean, I've worked with many people who are extremely qualified to do what I do. Right. They just don't want to. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
Like I grew up, my dad was a hardcore DIY person, still is. Like I always joke, like he'll like die before he pays somebody to clean the gutters out. But so I grew up doing everything, re-roofing the house, re-drywall in the house, whatever. And so there's a lot of stuff I can do around the house or the yard that I'm very qualified for because I have enough experience and I have the tools and the training.
Yeah.
But I don't have the time. I don't have the passion. I don't have the desire. And realistically, when I do hire a pro, there is that 10 to 15% better that they're doing that I'm like, yeah, it's noticeable. That was completely worth it.
Yeah. I mean, my brother and I built this studio behind me right here. We built the space that I'm in. We can do it, but sometimes you just kind of go, I just don't have the time. And I'd rather have somebody else with the accountability that I can say, hey, this is, I need to see, this, or I need to get that. And I think that's what you get with a financial professional. Again, plus you also get that behavioral piece. I can't stress that enough. Yeah. That's a huge piece of it, right?
Well, and I think the other part is, what are you focusing on? Because I think if you're focusing on the investments, let's say, then you might feel like, oh, I love picking my own investments. I'm a hardcore DIY. I check my Schwab or Fidelity account every day. I always know what's going on. I got my finger on the pulse. If I'm focusing on that, whenever you focus, you do have other blind spots, period.
Sure.
And so if I'm focused on one thing, then I have other blind spots. I mean, look at our pilots, right? If they're focused on one thing, they got all these on their instrument panels, all these different systems and alert and warnings to alert them of other issues because they're focused on something else. In that same thing,
what's the tax situation? Are you even looking at your taxes, right? Are you thinking about Social Security and the strategy that's going to play? Are you thinking about what IRMA taxation is going to do to you based on how you pull your stuff when you get to retirement, for Medicare? So
yeah. So I think there's a lot of those items out there that, again, they're not necessarily super, super complicated topics, but when you take them in whole and you say, okay, I have all this information.
Yeah.
How do I get the right insight to do what's best for me? And that's where I think it can get challenging. Because again, if I'm DIY, if I'm a full-time pilot and then a part-time advisor for myself, then I'm getting one rep at it for me and my family.
Yeah.
And I think, like for us helping people retire, like we're doing that all day, every day, all year. When we're building financial plans, we're doing that. Like there's not a lot of learning that's going on and we're not making mistakes on myself and my own family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We've got the systems in place. We've got the team built around us to cover down on those blind spots. So we're not making mistakes because it's systematized across, many, many, many client households. And so when you get plugged into an ecosystem that's, dialed into what you do for a living, your likelihood of risk, your likelihood of mistakes significantly goes down. And again, you don't want to be the one looking at your spouse saying, hey, I made a mistake.
I jacked that up. Yeah, exactly. Well, what is it? Geniuses learn from the mistakes of others, right? So if you've never planned your own retirement, and more than likely you have not, right? So turn to somebody who does it on a regular. You know, a lot of us are not going to pull a Favre or a Brady and retire 5 times.
Right.
You know, we want to retire once and get it right the first time. All right. Well, you know, so look, at the end of the day, we could go through a list of probably 15 other things that you have to deal with in retirement. You know, your RMD distribution, right? Are you versed in that? It's not super hard once you get it set up, but you know, do you want to mess it up and be wrong? Do you want to take the penalty, right? Or what if you don't need it and you want to do a charitable contribution? You want to do a QCD or something like that? If you just don't do this stuff every day, again, why would you want to? Why would you want to mess with the paperwork and do the hassle? Have somebody else handling it for you.
Yeah, I mean, and I think at the end of the day, a lot of folks probably just feel like exactly how I felt, which is this person's just putting me in some funds and then they're milking fees off of me.
Right. And that's not where you want to be.
That is not where you want to be. If you're feeling like that's where you're at, then you should run. Absolutely.
But you know what, Scott? That's why some of the actual advisors like yourself, right, do offer consultations complimentary, right? So, hey, find the right fit too. It's not just the X's and the O's, but it's also the rapport.
Yeah, you want to know, again, that this is a trusted advisor. I believe what they say. I implement the advice that they give me because I know they're only going to tell me what's in my best interest.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, there is going to be a certain percentage of people like my dad that are just like a do-it-yourself till they die.
Sure. Nothing wrong with it.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say get the education to do a really good job for you and your family. You can do it, but you know, you don't need to go get licensed or whatever because you're not giving investment advice to other people, but you should go get a lot of the same education so you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yep. Which is why we were able to do this podcast, because he can do that and I ask the questions. So that's why it works. So, all right. Anything else before we go, my friend?
No, I mean, I think, you know, just the parting words here, I would say, you know, is if you're not sure, talk to somebody. Most advisors, I know we do it here, most advisors will offer that no cost consultation.
Yep.
You can always hop on and just say like, hey, let me get some education. Let me get some information. Let me see what I could have been doing or should have been doing. And if it all checks out and I'm good to go, then I'm good to go. And if there's opportunities to improve, then I can explore what that looks like. And then ultimately I can see at the end of the day, the value the advisor offers has to be in excess of the fee. If the value is below the fee, none of us want to pay that for anything. I don't want to pay for someone to cut my grass and have them do a terrible job or just not show up and do it. But if the value is in excess of the fee, it can make a lot of sense to go that direction for yourself. So,
yeah, I mean, fees come with everything in life, right? So what's the value that you're getting for the fee that you're paying? You do it when you go get a hamburger, do it when you get an advisor, right?
You got
Comes across the board. So if you got some questions, need some help, check the show notes below for links to get a hold of Scott. Of course, you can just go to retireairlines.com. That is retireairlines.com. And if you got those questions, need that help, again, please reach out to a qualified professional like Scott Osborn. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And ring the notification bell and the little thumbs up so you catch new episodes when they come out. And we'll see you next time here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.